Pay cash for a $48,000 car the year you retire, and the IRS can turn more than $32,000 of the Social Security you were already collecting into taxable income. Not the car, the Social Security, a benefit that sat almost entirely untaxed on last year's return. You did nothing careless. You avoided a loan. You paid in full, out of your own money, the way careful people do. The check you wrote said $48,000. Once the tax return came in 6 months later, the real cost of that car was $54,000. And that is the smallest regret on this list. Because the purchases retirees regret most often were never the reckless ones. No boat, no casino. Every item on this list looked like the responsible choice on the day it was made. Safe or generous or earned. And everyone kept taking money afterward, in tax, in fees, in maintenance, or in what those dollars never got to become. One number decides all five, and it is not the price. Take the total dollars a purchase consumed. Then ask what those same dollars would have been worth at the end of a 20-year retirement, sitting in an ordinary balanced portfolio instead. At 6%, an illustration rate, not a promise, a dollar you hand over at 65 is $3.21 you do not have at 85. Every figure that follows gets measured against that multiplier. In the next 15 minutes, you get all five, counted down, one tax number, then 4 annual ones, and what each becomes by 85. Stay for the one at the top. It was never presented to you as a purchase at all. It was presented as protection, and the word used in the room was guaranteed. I am your guide to the retirement decisions that keep charging you long after the paperwork is signed. One quick favor before we start the countdown. If this is the kind of arithmetic you want showing up in your feed, tap like and subscribe right now so the next one reaches you on its own. Regret number 5. The new car, bought the year you retired. Transportation is not a small line. It is the second largest expense in the American household budget after housing. The Bureau of Labor Statistics put it at $13,318 a year in 2024 across all households, working and retired together. The problem is not the car. It is where the cash came from. Everything from here runs on 2026 federal rules. Take a married couple, both 67, filing jointly, $42,000 a year in combined Social Security, $18,000 drawn from a traditional IRA. Nothing else. Their provisional income, the $18,000 of IRA money plus half the Social Security, $21,000, comes to $39,000. That sits between the two federal thresholds, so only $3,500 of their benefit is taxable. Then come the deductions. The standard deduction for a joint return, the extra amount the tax code gives people 65 and older, and the new senior deduction, $6,000 per qualifying spouse, age 65 or older, phased out at higher incomes and written into law only through 2028. Stack those and this couple's federal income tax bill is zero. Now they withdraw $48,000 for the car. Provisional income jumps to $87,000. Past the $44,000 line for a joint return, the taxable share of Social Security climbs to its ceiling, 85% of the benefit. $35,700. That is $32,200 more of their own Social Security exposed to tax than the year before. Run the return. Taxable income lands around $54,000, and the federal tax comes to a little over $6,000 on a household that owed nothing 12 months earlier. Sit with what just happened. The withdrawal did not only add $48,000 of IRA income, it dragged $32,000 of their own Social Security, money already deposited, already spent, into the taxable column with it. Count the federal tax, and the $48,000 car cost $54,000. State tax, if your state taxes this income, is on top of that. And those $6,000 avoidable dollars, left alone, are worth just over $19,000 at 85. And this couple never came close to a Medicare surcharge. The 2026 joint line does not start until $218,000, and Medicare reads that off your tax return from 2 years back. This is the cheap version of the mistake. The fix costs nothing. Split the purchase across 2 tax years, a deposit in December, the balance in January, or take part of it from a Roth, where the dollars never land in provisional income at all. Same car, same driveway. The tax bill simply never happens. Regret number 4, the timeshare. Nobody buys a timeshare for themselves. They buy it for the family. One guaranteed week, prepaid, forever, so the grandchildren have somewhere to come back to. Here is what forever costs. The American Resort Development Association, the timeshare industry's own trade group reporting on itself, puts the average purchase price at about $23,900 and the average annual maintenance fee at about $1,480 in 2024. Between 2023 and 2024 alone, that fee rose about 17.5%, in a year when general consumer prices rose under 3. Carry that fee for a 20-year retirement, rising 5% a year, and it totals just under $49,000. Add the purchase price, and you're close to $73,000 for 1 week of lodging a year. The purchase price by itself, left in a portfolio, would be worth about $77,000 at the end of that same 20 years, and the exit is the other half. Many owners find there is effectively no resale market waiting for them. Units get listed for $1 and sit unsold. Exit companies routinely ask thousands of dollars up front just to negotiate a release, and this corner of the market attracts operators who take the fee and deliver nothing. Call the resort first and ask whether they run a deed-back program. Some developers would rather take the unit back for a processing fee than chase a delinquent account. One more piece nobody raises while you are signing. The obligation does not necessarily stop when you do. It can follow the estate. Heirs generally have the right to refuse an inherited interest rather than accept it, but a formal refusal carries strict timing and paperwork rules. Have that conversation with an estate attorney in advance, not after. Regret number 3. The whole life policy kept 20 years past its purpose. When it was bought, the logic was sound. You were 38. If you died, your spouse lost your income. The mortgage had 22 years left, and the children still had to be raised. A death benefit was the correct answer. Permanent insurance can still be exactly right when it is solving a real problem. An illiquid estate, a dependent who will always need care, a business that has to pass on. Hold that. Now look at what is true today for most households. The mortgage is gone. The children are adults with their own paychecks. Your spouse has their own Social Security benefit and a claim on the portfolio you spent 4 decades building. For that household, the problem the policy was purchased to solve was not solved by the policy. It was solved by 40 years of work. Say the premium is $300 a month, $3,600 a year, across a 20-year retirement that is $72,000 of premium. The same $3,600 a year, redirected into a balanced portfolio at 6%, comes to roughly $132,000. There is a second problem hiding inside many of these contracts. Policies written in the late 1990s and early 2000s were commonly illustrated at 8 to 10%. Many have credited 3 or 4 before internal expenses come out. Your own contract is the only one that counts here, and there is one document that shows you which side of that you are on. A policy that is not earning what it was drawn to earn can run out of cash value and lapse. Decades of premiums producing no death benefit and nothing to withdraw. And on many traditional permanent policies, the death benefit is what gets paid. The cash value you have watched accumulate is generally not paid on top of it. Read your own contract because policies differ. Do not start with a cancellation. Start with one phone call. Ask the insurer for a current in-force illustration, projected at the rate the policy is actually crediting today, not the one on the sales material from 1999. If it shows the policy running out of money before you do, the options include a reduced paid-up conversion, a 1,035 exchange into an income annuity, or a life settlement if the face value and your health qualify. Every one of those has strings: an outstanding policy loan, your cost basis, a surrender charge still running, the tax on what comes out, medical underwriting. Get the numbers in writing from the insurer and take them to your own tax person before you sign. Now come back to the thought I asked you to hold. If that death benefit is still doing that work, the math holds and you keep the policy. If the premium goes out every year purely because it always has, this is the year to check. 2 left, and they are the 2 biggest. If number 3 is in your file cabinet, make that call this week. It is free. Regret number 2. The second home bought for a family that does not come. This one was bought out of love, which is exactly why nobody ever runs the number on it. Take a $400,000 lake house, owned outright. Property taxes, call it $4,800 a year. Insurance, $2,400. Utilities running 12 months whether anyone is there or not, another $2,400. Maintenance at 1% of value, $4,000. That is $13,600 a year before a single tank of gas to drive up there. Those are illustration figures, not national averages. Use your own tax bill and your own premium. Both swing hard by state and by flood zone. Costs rise. At 3% a year, that carrying cost across a 20-year retirement is more than $365,000. The same $13,600 a year, invested at 6% instead, is right around $500,000. That $500,000 is the carrying cost alone. It does not count the $400,000 of house value, not what it may appreciate, and not what you would recover if you sold. This is the conservative number, not the dramatic one. Now go get your calendar and count the nights anyone actually slept there last year. Use your number, not mine. But run it at 18 nights, and you're paying over $750 a night for a house you already own. That house was bought so the family would have a reason to gather. That is a good reason, and the number does not make it a bad one. It just deserves one honest look. The adult children are not being ungrateful. They have jobs, in-laws with their own lake, and children whose summers are booked in March. And when the house passes to 2 or 3 of them jointly, one wants to sell, one wants to keep it, and none of them wants the roof. Co-owned inherited property is a reliable way to put siblings on opposite sides of a lawyer's table. If the property genuinely rents most of the year, it is a business, and this arithmetic changes completely. If it sits empty 11 months while you write the checks, the honest question is whether that $500,000 belongs in a lake or in your income plan. Regret number 1. The deferred, rider-loaded variable annuity that was sold to you as safety. Not every annuity. That specific one. It usually arrives after a bad market. You had just watched the statement fall. Someone across the desk said, "Principal protection and guaranteed," and it felt like the most cautious decision available. There was no invoice either. The commission is paid by the insurance company, so the product feels like it costs nothing. The Securities and Exchange Commission publishes what it actually costs in its investor bulletin on variable annuities. Your own contract will differ, but here is the shape of it. The mortality and expense risk charge typically runs about 1.25% a year. Administrative fees typically run about 0.0001%, or a flat $25 or $50. On top of that sit the expenses of the underlying funds and a separate charge for every optional rider attached. Put $250,000 in. At 6% gross over 20 years, that money grows to just over $801,000. Now subtract only 2 of those charges, mortality and expense, plus the administrative fee. 1 4/10% together. This is deliberately the conservative floor. It leaves the fund expenses and every rider out. On that basis, the money grows to about $614,000 instead, $187,000. In this illustration, that is the gap with two charges counted. The real one is wider. Then there is the cage. The SEC's own description, a 7% surrender charge in the first year, 6% in the second, 5% in the third, and so on. After 6 to 8 years, sometimes as long as 10, it may no longer apply. Their own example, a $100,000 contract. You withdraw $50,000 in year 1. $10,000 comes out free. The 7% charge on the other $40,000 is $2,800. Take a breath. All that arithmetic says one thing. You're paying for the fees, the cage, and the riders, and the sales conversation covered none of the three. Now be precise about what the regret actually is. A plain lifetime income annuity is a legitimate retirement tool. It is longevity insurance, a paycheck that cannot outlive you. You already own one inflation-adjusted income floor for life, Social Security. So the question is never annuity yes or no. It is, what does this second one add that the first does not? And what does that addition cost? The regret is not income for life. The regret is the deferred, rider-loaded, high-expense contract sold for growth to a household that needed income. Find two numbers, the exact date your surrender schedule ends and the total annual expense in the prospectus fee table. If the product is wrong for you and the schedule has already run out, a 1,035 exchange can move the money to a lower-cost contract without creating a tax bill, but confirm the new contract does not start a surrender clock of its own. 5 purchases. Not one of them was reckless. Everyone was the careful option on the day it was chosen, and everyone kept billing long after the reason expired. So the question to carry out of this video is not, can I afford it? It is 2 questions. What does this cost me every year for the rest of my life? And what would those same dollars be worth at 85? Your assignment is 1 item. Pick the single thing on this list sitting in your house, your driveway, or your file cabinet right now and find its real annual number. Not what it is worth. What it takes. This is education. It is not financial advice and not legal advice either. I cannot see your contracts, your state, or your tax return, and those specifics are exactly where these decisions get made. So walk your own household's real numbers through with a fiduciary who can. That is not me covering myself. That is the step that protects you. If this changed how you look at one line in your budget, like the video, so it reaches somebody your age who is about to sign something. Subscribe so the next one gets to you before the next purchase does. And drop the word receipt in the comments. It tells me to keep running this arithmetic out loud. The money you saved was never meant to sit still. It was meant to pay you. And those 2 questions are how you make sure it does.